All right, guys. Our next guest is the best in the business when it comes to MMA analysts. You know his excellent work on his channel, Full Reptile, home of fight previews, fight reactions, and live streams during the pay-per-views, as well, of course, as his great work on BT Sports with the Dan Hardy Breakdown show. And don't forget the merchandise. That Full Reptile merchandise just has that pop and is always sold out. And I think for good reason, Dan, because it's in such high demand. He's kind enough to join us once again late at night from London to preview UFC 264. One and only Dan Hardy. Outlaw, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you?
I'm good, guys. Good to see you again.
The pleasure is always ours, man. So we're here to talk about Conor McGregor, or should I say Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 3, the trilogy fight, the big fight. So I guess it's only fitting that we start with the big question, man, the elephant in the room, and that's the calf kicks. Obviously, Dustin had so much success with them in the second fight. He used them to systematically take out Conor McGregor's movement, his accuracy, his offense, everything really. So if you're Conor, how do you adjust for them this time around, Dan?
Well, I think he comes in and uses his longer kicking game. The kind of game that we've seen against Dennis Siver, Diego Brandao, just kind of commanding the center without really trying to attack too much, but throw in those wide flamboyant kicks just as a display of confidence. He did it in the first Poirier fight, but in the second one he came out and was just heavy on that lead leg, looking for the left-hand counter. So I think he's going to be lighter on his toes. I think he'll go back to a more balanced looking stance as opposed to a boxing heavy front foot. And honestly, I think he's going to do one or two things. He's either going to flip it on Dustin and do the same to him, or he's going to have a really nice counter ready for the calf kick, which most people will be doing the week after in the UFC, no doubt. I think his upside kick is going to be a key for this one. That jamming into the lead leg, jamming into the midsection. I think he'll do well with that this fight.
And for those of us who aren't experts like you, Dan, just break it down for us. What would be the most optimal counter that you think that Conor McGregor would be looking at if Dustin does throw those calf kicks?
I mean, honestly, his left hand. The problem is that he's only got a certain amount of times that he can throw that before he does start to slow down. It's a finite weapon, and he has to be cautious and, choose his opportunities. But the reality is, if he lets Dustin just kick away at that leg with no deterrent, then he's going to continue doing it. And the best counter for it is a straight punch down the pipe. The danger to the calf kick is that it brings you into punching range, and most people leave themselves on the center line when they're kicking, because you have to be a lot closer to hit the angle of the calf correctly. So I think McGregor may be shortening his stance and being ready with that counter punch, or as I said, that hop side kick, being able to lift his leg away entirely and jam it into the midsection. I think he's got two good options, but I do think he's going to use them against Dustin as well, just to make a point.
It's fascinating as well because Dustin was speaking to Brad Okamoto in a really fun interview just a couple of days ago, and he was actually saying very similar stuff to what you're saying, man, which was that he believes Conor McGregor will try to do that during the fight. I'm wondering, with him preparing for this, how much do you think that affects his ability to possibly get a few more takedowns in this fight? If Conor McGregor is willing to engage more in a kicking game with Dustin Poirier, we know he's got some great takedowns already and super dangerous with the takedowns. He already got McGregor down in that second fight right at the beginning. Do you think that could be a big difference maker and effect maker for his takedowns in this one?
I don't think it will be as easy this time around. I think that the takedown was pretty much on the 30-second mark in the rematch. And I just think I think he got it because McGregor was too focused on one thing, which was landing his counter left. I think he caught him by surprise. I think if you see how easy that takedown was compared to when Khabib shot on him and had to work for a good 45 seconds to get him down, you can see that McGregor wasn't expecting that takedown attempt. Otherwise, he would have been more prepared to defend it. I think he was just so focused on landing his left hand in the first minute and knocking him out that he completely disregarded everything else. I think this time around, it's a different version of Conor. I think he makes Dustin work for everything, at least in those first two rounds. So if Dustin does decide to wrestle, it's going to be more difficult. He'll most likely lose Conor in the scrambles and have to chase him back to his feet. You might have to shoot 3 or 4 times before he actually is able to ground him. But it doesn't mean there's not value in doing that. We know that McGregor's limited with his conditioning, and I don't think that's going to change. I think Dustin knows that he's a 5-round fighter if he needs to be. And even if he loses the first 2 rounds, the fact that he's made McGregor work, but by taking him down or by making him throw or by making him cover, they're all benefits for Dustin Poirier because he's got 3 good rounds, with it being 25 minutes to work, even if he loses the first 2.
If Conor, for whatever reason, can't get him out of there in the first 2 rounds, how much do you think that changes the flow of the fight? And is it fair to say that it leans pretty heavily towards Dustin the longer the fight goes after that?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a big part of it will be the psychological hurdle for him because in those first 10 minutes, that's when Conor's most dangerous with his left hand. I mean, really, in the first 5 minutes. If Poirier can be cautious and can stay away from that, like he did in the rematch, punish him when he comes in. Like Conor's got ranges that he shifts through. The longest range is his wide kicking range, the taekwondo range. Mm-hmm. Then he moves into a shorter kicking range where, we've seen that in the Chad Mendes fight. We saw it against Nate Diaz, where he chops into the legs and he pokes the midsection with his side kick and his front kick. Past that, then he starts to transition into the left hand counters or the left hand attacks. If that starts to fall short, he starts going for that kind of lead screw uppercut. Landed it beautifully on Max Holloway, caught Dustin with it in the first round as well in the rematch. But that was the other thing that Dustin used against him in the last fight as well, is because Poirier was making him miss that left hand as it was coming in, and he was expecting the lead uppercut, he was actually catching him with a counter right hook. And those two, with the counter right hook and the calf kick, they pair quite nicely because the counter right hook punches you onto the leg that's already damaged. And that's the point that we saw Dustin take the center and really put his foot on the gas, is because he'd done the damage to that lead leg and he caught McGregor with a counter right hook and forced his weight onto it. And you saw the knee kind of give out. You saw a lack of integrity in that base. And then Poirier immediately takes the outside track, forced him against the fence. And that's the point where it's just downhill all day. I think the longer this fight goes, the better it looks for Dustin. And I think if he's smart in those first 2 rounds and he allows McGregor to work and maybe to punch himself out a bit, as soon as he walks out of his corner for the start of the 3rd round, he's going to feel like this fight's practically in the bag, because this is where he comes into his own. And I think he pressures McGregor. And I think, if we see the 3rd round, I think that's Poirier's fight. I'll be very, very impressed if McGregor does something in the championship rounds that makes him look like he's dangerous, because I've just not seen it.
Just out of curiosity, why do you think we saw so many less kicks from Conor and such a different stance and such different movement in that second Dustin Poirier fight? Do you think it was to do with the fact that he was, kind of focused on boxing at the time? It seemed like that Pacquiao fight was maybe on the horizon. Do you think maybe the abandonment of those flashy kicks that he used to use to sort of move people, to where he wanted them? Do you think maybe it was a conscious effort because he knew his cardio maybe isn't built for 25 minutes? Or do you think it was really just Dustin, taking his legs out from under him and he wasn't really able to get going?
There was definitely a difference in Conor's approach, but I don't know as I would say that it's because he was too focused on boxing. If anything, I think he just underestimated Dustin. I think because he won the first fight and he won it fairly comfortably, I think he'll forget the things that Dustin did well in that first fight. And Dustin was a different fighter then, but he still moved laterally. He still kicked his legs. He still caused him some problems. He still landed 52% of his shots, which weirdly is the same stat as he landed in the second fight. He's plus 50% against McGregor, and McGregor's always landed less. In the first fight, I think it was like 23% success rate McGregor had. It just so happened that he landed the better shots. So I think over the time between the 2 fights, McGregor has just he's diminished Poirier in his head as a threat. And I think that this time around, we see McGregor fully tuned in and ready to show his whole game to beat Poirier. Whereas in that rematch, I think he just came in feeling like, I'm gonna walk into his punching range. He's going to throw a jab. I'm going to catch him over the top and knock him out. And in the first sort of 90 seconds of a fight, Poirier's always a little bit more tense. If you see in other fights when he's been stung, like when he got stopped by Michael Johnson, Gaethje stung him pretty good in the first 90 seconds, first 2 minutes of the fight. He just seems a little bit tense to start with. Whereas, as soon as that 90 seconds has passed, he's very, very difficult to stop, very difficult to discourage. So I think McGregor thought that he could jump on Poirier early and catch him in that opening minute, and B, I think he just expected to be able to counter his jab and knock him out. I think it was a silly game plan, and I think he gave the fight away. And this one is a far more competitive one, because if you think back to when McGregor fought Nate the first time, like, he came in doing the same thing. Like, he overpunched himself in the first round. He looked lazy. He just didn't look like he was taking Nate seriously, and the toughness and durability of Nate shone through. In the second fight, even though he gassed, even though he looked pretty rough in the later rounds, he looked really sharp in the first round. And I think that's the version we get against Poirier. I think he comes in with his full skill set. I think we see a variety of long-range kicks, and then I think he starts working his close-range kicks, aiming to set up the left hand again. I don't think he'll make any secret about it, because he knows what he's good at. But he's certainly going to be more calculated in the application this time around.
Obviously, we got the press conference as well, Dan, and Conor McGregor, one of the best trash talkers out there. Dustin Poirier making some comments to Brett Okamoto about how he's prepared this time around. In the first fight that they had, obviously, the comments kind of got to Dustin a little bit, and he just kind of went out there full of emotion. This time he says he thinks he can handle it. I'm curious, Conor McGregor being the best at this, do you believe that Dustin will be able to keep his emotions in check and stick to his game plan when this trash talk starts going off? Because I imagine it's going to be pretty wild. Or do you think that it might be a little bit more than what Dustin is expecting? Because Dustin has been an emotional fighter in the past in a lot of his fights.
He has, but I do feel like he's turned a corner now. And I think the thing that's changed is the fact that he sees it as a job now more than everything in his life. He's got his family, he's got his charity. There are other things going on in his life. He's not put all of his eggs in this MMA basket. The last time he faced Conor McGregor, he felt disrespected. He wanted to get him back. There was so much riding on it, so much emotion coming into it. And he even stuck to a fairly good game plan until he got drawn in, sort of a minute into the fight. The second time around, he just didn't engage him at all. He was very intelligent the way he approached it. The times when he could have jumped on McGregor a bit earlier, he didn't. He waited and he calculated. And I think his lack of love for the brawl is probably what's going to help him deal with the emotional side of it. And the other thing as well is, when you can see the reality of the situation, it's quite a lot different to when you really genuinely are emotionally invested in it. Like, Poirier's at a circumstance now where he can look at McGregor, he can watch his antics at the press conference and go, I know this is part of your game plan and I'm not buying into it. I think he's a more mature fighter now, and I don't think there's anything that McGregor can do that's really going to get him that riled. Maybe the only danger would be overexcitement if he does see McGregor's hurt and he wants to chase after it. I think being calculated all the way through this fight is the best way for him to be. And I think he's mature enough to do it.
And how much do you think the confidence of knowing that he can actually beat him, how much do you think that's going to help going into this fight as well?
I think it's massive, especially because the more recent fight was a win for Poirier and there was a decent chunk of time between the two. And the other thing to consider as well is the first fight was at featherweight. And I just think Poirier takes a better shot at lightweight. He's a bigger individual. He's more heavily muscled in his neck and his shoulders. I think he takes a better punch at lightweight. I also don't think he took a clean punch off McGregor, and McGregor's got the power advantage. I don't think that's deniable. When Poirier stops somebody, it's because he's hit them with a 16-17 punch combination. Whereas McGregor can touch them one time and it's like a death touch. They just fall over. So I do think that McGregor can still land and can still hurt Poirier without throwing as much. But the volume of Poirier and the confidence that comes behind it, as well as now the adjustments that he makes when he's close range. Like early on in his WEC days, he was reckless, he was wild, and all of his punches were hooks. Every single one of them. There's no variety at all. Now you look at him when he's in that mid-flurry and he's going uppercut, hook, rolls his head, hook, knee. I mean, it looks chaotic, but it's far more considered now than it ever was. And I think that's a real value to him as well. Because, McGregor, once he's tired and backed up, he's not going to take the same kind of punishment that someone like an Eddie Alvarez would, or a Justin Gaethje. As soon as his gas tank is gone, he's there ready to be executed pretty much. And I think Dustin knows that, and I think he can weaponize his conditioning in this fight. But he has to be smart in order to do that. So that's why I don't think he gets drawn in, because I think he knows he can win this fight if he plays it well. And it's all about not biting on the emotional side of the game.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you about is, with Conor, hypothetically, let's say he makes all these adjustments. How do you think the time frame works for him? It's a pretty quick turnaround, and this is coming off a knockout loss, and he's fighting about 5 months later, just over 5 months. Whereas with Nate Diaz, it was a submission loss, so maybe not as much head trauma, and I think that was around the 7-month mark. I guess with Nate Diaz, maybe the adjustments were more so physical needed. He needed to build up better cardio, better stamina. In this one, how do you think it works for him? And is there anything that you've seen from Conor's training, maybe on social media or elsewhere, that leads you to believe, yep, he's made, big changes, the necessary ones that he's needed to make?
I think always when it comes down to Conor, the potential of him winning is always there. He's always got the possibility of outthinking his opponent, outmaneuvering them and knocking them out, because he has those attributes. Whether he chooses to engage them or not is really the question. Like in the second Poirier fight, I don't feel like he engaged the majority of that. I think he banked too heavily on the fact that he's got he is faster and he is more powerful. And I think the same thing with the Nate Diaz thing. I don't think between the first Nate Diaz fight and the second Nate Diaz fight, I don't think he changed too much physiologically. I don't think his conditioning improved a great deal. I don't know how much he would have been able to really make a difference. I think his limitations are physiological. I think there are just some people that are built to throw 12, 15 power punches in a fight, and after that they've got nothing left because they're so explosive. But then there are other people that they can punch you 30, 40, 50 times in the head and you just won't go away. It's like different ends of the spectrum when it comes to striking power and efficiency. And some people are sprinters and some people are marathon runners. And I don't know whether there's anything that Conor could do in 7 months or 5 months or 12 months or 24 months, which is really going to change that physiology. I think that's what he's working with. And I think the way that it works for him is when he's smart with his decision making. I mean, if he comes out just looking for the left hand, then he's not throwing anything else. And if the left hand is the thing that costs him the most energy, then, throw a few other things around it, disguise it a bit, set it up a bit better, use things that aren't quite as taxing on your cardiovascular system. Because if you've got 12 super punches, you better use them wisely, because you've got 24 minutes to spend them over. 25 minutes to spend them over. I don't think time frame makes a difference. Honestly, I think it's a fight IQ situation with McGregor. I think he wasn't very intelligent going into the last one. I think he was too reckless and disrespectful to Poirier, and I think he shows up different this time around. There was a lot of debate after the last one about he's not got his kicking game anymore. Like all that part of his hard drive was erased somehow. He's got all of those skills. It's what he chooses to bring to the battlefield. And he only chose one game plan for the last fight, and it just didn't work out. Whereas the previous fight, the first one, he was lively, he was light on his toes, he was moving. He came out with a high kick and a back kick, and there was variety in his game. And I really think that's the key for him in this fight next coming up. I think it's smart decision making, and he's got the ability to do that all day. But if he doesn't, Poirier will walk over him again.
I was watching excuse me, there's the COVID coming in. I was watching the Notorious documentary, and that's a great piece of viewing. And if people haven't watched that yet, great watch before this fight to really get a handle on who Conor McGregor is as a person. And just the determination that he had early on in his fight career to make it, and just being in that small apartment and just going into training every day, just having wars, just trying to improve. I'm wondering, how hard do you think that is to recapture for him now that he's got all the money, that he's got the Bentley, driving to training in the Bentley, that he doesn't have that hanging over his head that he's got to do it, he's got to make it? How hard is it for a fighter just in general, and especially him, to find that same motivation he once had in that documentary where you watch it at the start?
I think this is the big question coming in, and I think the fact that he's had such a closed training camp and he's not really shown a great deal of what he's doing is what's concerning people more than anything. I mean, we know that he's in shape. We know he's conditioned. We know that there's not going to be a great deal of body fat on his frame, but that's a sensible restrictive diet and a good basic conditioning plan. I mean, it's not difficult for him to maintain that look. What we need to know is whether he's in the trenches, whether he's digging deep, whether he's having those training sessions where he just can't get back to his feet because people are constantly trying to take him down, or he's done 3 rounds of sparring already and then they put the next guy in who throws 50 punches around. I don't know. That's the question. And when it comes to the question of motivation, if you go back to where he was early on in his career when he didn't have anything, of course he's chasing the dream of being a great martial artist, but he's also chasing financial security and fame and a whole bunch of other things, that have been checked off his list. And if we imagine the items on that list equate to 100%, what percentage was being a great martial artist, being known as the best martial artist that's ever lived? It may not have been more than 20 or 30%. So if the other 70 or 80%, which was, I need to be richer, I need to be secure, I need to set my family up for life, I need to, if all of those things equated to the other 70 or 80% and then no longer there, I don't know. I don't know. That's the big question. As an analyst, I can only tell you what I've seen previously, and like he does get lazy in fights. He does take his eye off the prize. He does overestimate people. But he's 1-on-1 with Poirier, and I don't expect him to be just kind of sitting around hoping this win's going to be delivered to him. I just don't think he's that kind of person. I think there's too much hanging on it. If he loses 2 to Poirier, like anything he says from this point onwards, the tough guy talk and that, it's all devalued. His brand would take a serious hit. And I know he's got loads of money, of course. I know he's not really that bothered about it personally. But there's also an element of ego attached to it, an element of wanting to be famous and wanting to be able to apply your name to a drink or a watch or a diet plan or whatever, and for it to blow up. That is diminished after a couple of losses, especially if they're both knockouts. So I think there's a lot on the line for McGregor, and that's one of the things that may motivate him. It's not to keep progressing, but to maybe maintain what he's already got.
I was going to ask you yourself, Dan. Obviously you had a lot of fame and success in your UFC run. Did you notice it difficult to keep the same motivation in certain parts in your run? Did you sort of experience that on some kind of scale?
No, honestly, I think the only struggle I had is that I got a bit ahead of myself after the GSP fight, because I never made a great deal of money, and fame wasn't nearly what it is these days. I mean, it was 2010. Most of the interviews I was doing was people were still asking me questions about what MMA was, so it was a different landscape, and I not really, no. I just felt like after the GSP fight, I took too much time. I took too much time out. I wanted a bit of a break. I was burnt out. I was grieving for my grandfather, and I don't know. In the time, I mean, it was only maybe 4 months or so, but in that time, I had so many people tell me how amazing I was and how if I got some takedown defense, I'd beat him the next time around. Start to believe it. and that's the danger with McGregor, is everybody around him is kissing his ass because he's got $100 bills falling out of his pockets. Like, everybody's going to be nice to him. Everyone's going to be complimentary of him and tell him how good he is and how unlucky he was in that last fight against Poirier, because if he'd have just landed that left hand, Poirier would have been starched again. And, if you hear that that rhetoric every day, it doesn't matter how realistic you are on yourself. You do become kind of indoctrinated with your own self-worth. And that could be a danger in this fight as well. I don't know how honest his coaches are with him. I don't know how honest his training partners are when they're sparring with him. Are they licking him up and letting him know where his gaps are? Or are they kind of coasting and letting him do his work so they bring him back next week so they get that £100 payday or whatever it is that he brings in sparring partners and pays them? Everything's changed at this point for him. And whether he's got somebody around him that can just look him in the eyes and go, what are you doing? How do you expect to win this fight training like this? I don't know. I hope so, because I want to see the best of him, because I do think he is a better martial artist just generally than Poirier. I think he's got a better mastery of range and striking, better understanding of the application of martial arts and how to work somebody over psychologically as well. But you've got to earn it as well. You can't just get in there with the skills that you've earned in your early career and expect it to carry you all the way. Especially when you've got a dog in front of you like Poirier, who will just take you into deep water and see what you're made of.
Yeah, 100%. I'm so excited for this fight. Speaking of seeing what you're made of, if you're made of like 90% pubes, well, there's a solution for that. The Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0 will help you, bring down the stats to maybe 5% pubes or 7% pubes or, whatever. Trim your body hair wherever you want to trim it. Maybe your arms, maybe your back. I know I'm becoming an old man. I'm getting that back hair, that ear hair that wasn't there a few years ago when I was a slim, young, nubile young man. And aerodynamicness just came by itself, and now it just doesn't as an early 30s man. So with the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0, the engineers have spent over 18 months crafting the skin-safe technology so you can shave your balls in the shower because it's waterproof with the LED light if, I don't know, you're Batman and you live in the cave. And you can shave them without the fear of cutting yourself or nicking yourself. So get the Lawnmower 3.0, be the best version of yourself. And speaking of best versions, use the code SUBMISSION because they're giving away 20% off site-wide on anything you purchase. They've got all sorts of ball deodorants. They've got colognes, anything to make you smell good, make you nice and clean, and I believe free shipping as well. So Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0, the official sponsor of Submission Radio. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, Cass. And a free tip from Submission Radio. Let's say you go out on a date with a young lady or an old lady or a man or anything that you want to go out with, and you ask them early in the interview, just like you're having an entree, you just go randomly like, do you like long pubes? You work it into the conversation and then go yes or no. Well, with a shed travel bag that you get at Manscaped, you can on the spot modify your pubes to their liking. Who knows? Maybe it's going to help you at the end of the day. And don't worry, you don't have to thank your friends over at Submission Radio. We're just here for you guys. And after you're done getting lucky on your first date with whoever it might be, maybe you want to buy something nice for them to thank them for spending some time with you. And that's where my bookie comes in, basically. Basically at my bookie right now, if you guys want to take an advantage of an up to $1,000 bonus on your first deposit, sign up with promo code SUBMISSION. This is the only place to go to for your UFC 264 betting. They have the best prop bets, the best opportunities for you to make some serious cash. Sign up right now with that code word SUBMISSIon. Get up to $1,000 bonus on that first bet. Make some serious money on Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, and then make some extra sneaky money on these prop bets. MyBookie, bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
That's right. With UFC it is 264 around the corner this coming weekend. It is the perfect time to take advantage of the deal and make some money, which is why we're going to ask Dan Hardy for his prediction. And Dan, is my final question on this fight, by the way. I do get a sense that you're leaning pretty heavily towards Conor McGregor here. I can sense the confidence in you. Who are you leaning towards this one? Is it fair to say you're leaning towards Conor in this one?
It's weird because, my logical head goes, well, I think, if they fought 10 times, Poirier wins probably 60, 70%, so I think he wins 70% of them. But McGregor's he's a big game hunter, and these are the kind of moments where he shines. And I don't know, there's just something in my head. I'm thinking to myself, I just feel like McGregor's going to come in looking really sharp, and he's going to show the depth in talent that he's got in comparison to Poirier, and that is in no means disrespectful to Poirier, but when he gets a win, he earns it. He has to dig deep. McGregor's been making it look easy for years, And I know he's struggled of late, but look at the way he ran through Cowboy. Look at the way he dropped Nate Diaz several times in their second fight, and Leon couldn't put him down. Leon's a big, fast welterweight. There's something special about Conor, and I don't think he landed cleanly on Poirier, but I also don't think he brought his brain with him last time. And I don't think he makes that same mistake again. So although I lean towards Poirier as, he's the most consistent, the most reliable, I know what to expect, Conor's the unknown commodity. I feel like coming into this fight, even though he is the unknown commodity, we kind of know because of what's previously happened what we're going to get from him. And that's a dangerous individual and a great martial artist.
So you're leaning towards Conor McGregor.
I guess I didn't answer your question. No, I'm leaning towards McGregor. I know it feels like an illogical decision for me, but I just kind of feel like these are the occasions which he rises to. And I don't think he'll come in and take Poirier lightly the third time. I think he knows how much is riding on this. I mean, where does he go from here? He's fighting Tony Ferguson if he don't win this one. You know what I mean? And he's tied up in the contract, so he needs to be making the most out of it. I think he's going to come in looking really good, and I think Poirier will as well. But I think he will get the best version of both guys. I think McGregor is able to catch him.
I'm excited, man. I'm super excited, especially hearing you break it down, Dan. Don't want to take up too much of your time, but just want to really quickly touch on this fight as we let you go. And that is, of course, Stephen Thompson versus Gilbert Burns. Two former title challenges, man. Two very exciting fighters. Gilbert with his amazing jiu-jitsu and his vastly improved striking, and Thompson with, obviously, his incredible distance control and his elite kickboxing. How do you see this one going down, man? This one is, I feel like, a pretty tough one to pick, and it's pretty big title implications here, especially for one Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, it is a difficult one to pick because you can see Wonder Boy coming to the end of his career. He's a similar age to me. He's 38. I know he looks like a teenager, and but that's because he never swears. I think it keeps him young. I feel like he might be too much for Gilbert. I feel like Gilbert's got a long way on intention and intensity, and knowing that he's got great jiu-jitsu to back it up. I thought he looked great against Tyron Woodley, but I think he staggered with someone with really good fundamentals in Usman. And we talk about good range management for McGregor. Like, Wonder Boy's a master at it. He's only stumbled against the very best in the world. And even sometimes when he stumbled, he's been winning the fight up to that point, like he was with the Pettis fight. I think he's a great martial artist, and I think that there's a recklessness to Gilbert Burns's game, his striking game in particular, which makes him a difficult challenge for everybody in the division. But the odds are stacked in Wonder Boy's favor because he's going to be able to read those moments when he's coming in. And I feel like as long as I'm seeing Wonder Boy of old, the guy that fought Darren Till and gave a really good account of himself against Pettis, I think he's a bit too much for Gilbert Burns, even at this stage. But then, this is where I might be underestimating Burns and overestimating Wonder Boy at this point in his career. Like you said, it's a hard one to pick. I could quite easily see Burns wading in, cracking him with a big shot, and then dragging him to the floor where his jiu-jitsu game takes over. But I've always been impressed with Wonder Boy's takedown offense and scrambling ability. I think it's about 84% his takedown offense. And Burns is not the tidiest of wrestlers. There is a recklessness to that part of his game as well. So I'm leaning towards Wonder Boy in that one, but I am really excited to see how it plays out.
And Dan, you're usually right about everything that you say, but saying you don't look young, 38, man, you look exactly the same as you did in the GSP years. Analyze your look in the mirror a little bit better, man. You're looking great. Get out of it. All right, guys, make sure to follow the man on Twitter and Instagram at Dan Hardy MMA, YouTube Full Reptile, the Dan Hardy Breakdown Show on BT Sport, The War Room, his book, Full Reptile. And are you guys doing the ride-along for this one? You guys
we are. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Dude, we'll imagine that.
Couple of prelims before the main card will start. It's going to be wild. I can't wait.
This is like one of the best things going around today. These watch-alongs are hilarious. There's so much fun, so much insight. I feel like this is something that people need to check out, and this is the perfect chance for them. If they haven't checked it out yet, this is the card to do it. UFC 264. Mr. Dan Hardy, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you, guys.